saw the Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe announcing the names of the 8 preferred bidders to provide emergency power to stop load shedding. The companies have to start providing power by August next year. Now it's emerged that of the 1,845 megawatts that will be supplied under that system, 1,220 of those megawatts will be supplied by the company Car Power Ships. The company anchors massive ships off a harbour, then uses liquefied natural gas to provide the electricity. It also appears the contracts which have been signed under the emergency provision have been signed for 20 years. But there were also important announcements yesterday about the long-term provision of power. You'll know that this sector is changing very, very quickly in terms of renewable electricity. At the same time, of course, Eskom, as you experienced this week, cannot keep the lights or your television on all the time. Well, what are the implications of all of this? Prashaen Reddy is a partner at Kearney. He is going to explain to us how liquid natural gas works. Desmond Desar is from the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance. Navesh Govinder is, Avida Schnabel is from the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association, and Dr. Jaco Volskink is a strategy and sustainability analyst at the University of Stellenbosch's Business School. Let's start with gas. Prashaen Reddy, good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time. You're an expert in this area. We understand natural gas has been found in our region, particularly of Mozambique. How does this technology work? How do you get gas to a power ship which is plugged into a harbour?
Good afternoon, Stephen, and thank you for having me. That's correct. So liquefied natural gas is exactly as it is defined. It's just a liquefaction of natural gas into a liquid, and that allows for us to transport it around the world and move the gas in ways so that it can be regasified and utilized in sort of power generation facilities or chemical production facilities. Correct, we have a large amount of natural gas occurring in the region, particularly large finds in Mozambique, as we are all aware of. And that natural gas can be shifted into markets like South Africa via pipeline. But of course, those would need to be constructed to where the gas occurs, or LNG, which is where we liquefy the natural gas and then ship it or move it around the world to where it needs to be consumed.
I mean, this must be large quantities. A pipeline's one thing, but we're not going to have a pipeline by August next year when these car power ships, these 3 vessels, are supposed to start producing. So would there be a sort of series of ships that would be transporting this stuff?
Yeah, so liquefied natural gas is an existing industry, of course. Mozambique is of course still getting into the production of gas. We have a market for liquefied natural gas around the world, which can be sourced from Australia and other regions as well, into where they need to be consumed. So it doesn't necessarily have to be coming from Mozambique. Of course, until the production in Mozambique comes online, there will be some time for the gas to be sourced from other parts of the world. So certainly, yes, there is already a trading market and shipping market that moves gas around the world in liquid form, and then that can then, of course, be consumed in power stations and for other uses.
I mean, the big advantage of these power barges, or whichever word you like to use, is that they can start quickly. They can produce a lot of electricity very quickly. They're not cheap, but they do it quickly.
Absolutely, yes. That's the advantage. Instead of constructing large power plants, these can be mobilized in a far quicker way and therefore plugged into grids. And it's been used in many markets around the world to actually perform exactly that, plug the gap as quickly as possible between supply and demand for electricity.
Desmond Desar, you're from the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance. My understanding is that you may have 1 or 2 problems with this project. Desmond Desar, I don't know if you can hear me. I was saying to you, my understanding is that you have 1 or 2 problems with this project. You don't believe this is the right way for us to go.
Sure. Certainly, it is a step backwards, given that the country has signed the Paris Accord, and we're supposed to have a just transition and moving away to renewable energy. Gas is not the answer. We have a poor safety record in South Africa. And in Richards Bay itself, a ship broke up just outside the mouth of the harbour a couple of years ago. Coal shipment that was there, that was going out, the ship actually broke up. So we have a poor safety record, and gas is quite dangerous and hazardous that can create more problems for you. So we do have a problem with it. We have a problem in the way that it's going to destroy not only Mozambique, where it already has a huge destruction on the land, but also in South Africa, where the gas and gases being sought after in the ocean, where there's a huge potential for gas and oil exploration, that we find that will destroy millions of jobs, tourism jobs and green jobs, but also destroy the marine life. And we know that with Sasol, where the fracking is going to happen, that could create even more problems for farmers, contaminate the water. So the gas has been sought all over, not only Mozambique, but also in South Africa, and we are concerned about that. And already the Turkish ships have been brought to South Africa, have started off on the wrong note, where there was no environmental impact assessment. So what has occurred, all these agreements have been signed behind closed doors, and there's been limited public participation, even to ask for information. The first meeting that they ever sought after they were told to go back to the drawing board was last week, because we've been working in the Richards Bay area, and only to find that the information is not easily accessible. We've been asking the consultants, the facilitator that was hastily put together within a day, that hasn't brought the information to the public's thing, and poorly advertised, very poorly advertised about this development that can create so much of harm. We know that these ships, they blow up, and other gas installations can blow up in a place like Richards Bay, where you don't have a lot of safety and protection, and we still don't have emergency plans around these facilities in South Africa. So yeah, we are opposing it on a number of grounds. One is that it's very secretive, a process of this nature. We don't get the facts. And why would you have something, an emergency signed on a contract signed for 20 years? If it's an emergency, it must be brought now and dealt with now and used for now. And there must be limited time frame given to any emergency. Why is there a long-term period signed in here? Something doesn't smell right here. And surely Gwede Mantashe has a history of bullying civil society in this country. And we see that these deals that are being cut are not open and scrutinized by the public. And surely it's a waste of money. We've already invested in Medupi and Kusile billions of dollars that we owe to the World Bank, that we're still struggling to pay back, and they're not operational fully. Why is it that we should be moving to an energy that's not going to be taking us in the right direction, to renewable, which we're supposed to be working together with in this country, so that we have a just transition that protects jobs but also doesn't harm the environment? And we know gas, methane gas, for example, is not the solution to climate change. It ain't the solution for anything else. It's not going to create jobs. It's going to be very limited jobs, and the Turkish government that's bringing all these ships here are going to bring in their own expertise. So there's no job creation around this issue, and it's a fallacy to think that it's going to dig into the unemployment crisis in this country. Right, we have raised these issues as very serious issues. We think that the government needs to rethink about bringing in gas ships here to our country.
Strong views already in this discussion. More on this with the four members of our panel in just a moment. The future of electricity, the car power ships, the gas ships, are they the right way to go? Stay with us. Future of electricity after the big announcements yesterday, the 8 preferred bidders, including, it seems, 3 car power ships which will be anchored off our coast and plugging electricity into our harbour, generating electricity through the use of liquefied natural gas. You've already heard from Prashaen Reddy, a partner at Kearney, and Desmond Desar from the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance. Also with us, Vida Schnabel from the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association. You could call it the solar industry if you like. And Dr. Jaco Vulskink, a strategy and sustainability analyst at the University of Stellenbosch. Dr. Vulskink, let me come to you now. I mean, it would seem that liquefied natural gas, LNG, is not really sustainable. On the other hand, we need cheap electricity. We need it now. You could also use this moment to generate a whole new industry.
That's quite correct, Stephen. I think there are many pluses to using the car power ships. I think the biggest advantage that we will have from this is dispatchable energy. I think quite often with wind and solar, it's not immediately available when you require it. Of course, for that you can have batteries. So I think there are plenty of things that we can do. What's interesting to me is the places where these ships will go are not really economic hubs at the moment, and I think that will possibly bring about some economic growth in that area. I think we do have to ask questions about the direct job creation, but on the other hand, our economy is bleeding. Daily, we are out of 6,000 megawatts that's not available to us. So I think if we balance the desperateness of our economy, I think we have to consider what we have available to us. The question about, the 20 years or not, I think that's not really a point that we can argue. If it's going to be through the procurement program of government, these are 20-year contracts. We can't really have them short term. But I have to agree that it's a little bit crazy to sign these for 20 years. And yet, on the other hand, I think if we compare the marginal cost of what this electricity will cost us, it's not that different to renewable energy. And at the same time, natural gas is at least 50% more efficient in terms of coal emissions than coal, or carbon emissions than coal, and 20% less than diesel. So I think there are benefits in cost-wise. It's not crazy. It's much cheaper than the diesel that we're trying to generate emergency power with. So I think all in all, I don't think the government really has that many issues, many options at the moment.
So Dr. Volskink, I mean, in a way, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when we're faced with the situation that we're faced with an economy that needs cheap electricity. This is not the best. It's a little bit cheap and dirty, but it works.
Absolutely. It's certainly not an attractive option, but I don't think we have that many options right now.
Wieler Schnabel, you represent, of course, the solar power industry, the photovoltaic industry. You would have heard the comment, of course, that it means that, that solar industry, the wind power as well, are not what the industry calls biddable power. In other words, it's not always on. Do you think your industry would have been able to play a bigger role in this emergency situation? I know, of course, you seem to be fairly happy with the long-term announcements that were made by the Minister, Gwede Mantashe, yesterday.
Yeah, Stephen, good afternoon, and good afternoon to the listeners. I think we are quite happy, and I actually must a little bit correct something. The fact that renewables have made it into a gas tender, if I can call it that, is remarkable. It shows that renewables, wind, solar, and storage with battery can compete. And that shows what the technology has done over the years in this regard. So do we have an option? Yes, we do. We could do this with renewables as well. So I think that is really the fact, and that's why I'm happy that renewables have won projects in here and that they can compete. And I think that is something to celebrate. That is great. Remember, this is not a renewable energy program tender process. It was a risk tender. It has had complete different requirements and requirements of capacity, for example. Of course, these are very high requirements. And in order to put that capacity in, you have to put huge batteries in order to compensate for the intermittency of wind and solar. And that has shown that we still, with that huge factor of storage, can compete. And that's a great sign. I think we've done very well. And that is where I think then if you do something like that, then the 20 years for solar, wind, and storage is absolutely correct. If it is correct for an emergency is the question, but that is not me to answer. This was the tender, that was what came out, and I'm happy that we made it and that we showed that we can compete, and that's the important thing.
In an emergency situation, I mean, even in a non-emergency situation, there are obviously different timelines to build different types of power plants. We know if you want to build Medupi and Kusile, you better have 20 years, and even after that, it may still not work. I'm not being entirely fair. 15 years is perhaps a bit more accurate. But I know, for example, that some people in the wind industry, they're sort of your competitors, but I think they're friendly competitors, they say that once all the documentation is done, they can get a big windmill, and I do mean a big windmill, going in 18 months. How long does it take to get a solar plant going? And obviously, it will depend on the size of the plant.
Yes, and that is the fact. We could be as quick as wind, and we could also be as quick as any other power generation. Now, of course, if you have got a generator, a diesel generator that you can plonk down somewhere, which is already being built, that's maybe not a fair comparison. But if we build solar plants, and the beauty, remember, solar plants can be built in modules, and same with batteries, and same with wind generation. We can start within 3 months where you can have 50 megawatts up. That is not an issue. So within 18 months, we can easily have 150, 250 megawatts per plant up. That is not a big issue. So if every paperwork is done and everything is there, solar can be very quick to connect to the grid. And it has shown that in the past. If you look at all those solar plants that have been commissioned these days, they were all on time. They were even before the date that was set for the grid connection. And therefore, I think if there is one technology that can be quick, that can be distributed, and that is cheap, then it's solar PV.
You're a good salesperson. You should work in the industry, Gwede. Prashaen Reddy, if I can just come back to you on the gas industry. You'll have heard, obviously, solar is going to make the case for solar. If the wind industry were here, they'll make the case for wind. Going forward, you would have heard the environmental concerns around liquefied natural gas. We've had a partial defense from Dr. Fulskink. But is it worth us being a part of this industry in the longer term? And I'm talking about the international industry that you've spoken of. If Mozambique has the natural gas, if we're the ones who maybe process it or provide, the car power ships could provide, I suppose you could call it like an anchor tenant. In other words, we have a customer that needs it. Could this be an industry that's worth plugging into in the longer term? Or over 20 or 30 years, is the world of power generation going to change so much that we don't actually want to be a part of that?
Yeah, I think certainly what we see forecasted into the world is definitely the decline of oil and coal as the sort of hydrocarbons that are going to sort of exit the energy mix as we move forward. And gas certainly is seen as a transitionary hydrocarbon. It's less harmful to the environment compared to oil and coal. Of course, it's not as great as renewables can be in terms of the emissions. So, of course, we're going to be in this bridging world for some time before we shift to the ultimate future where we can get battery storage and at scale and really start to really push the renewables agenda globally. This is the problem the whole world is facing, not just South Africa. And if I look at it from our perspective, we've got 80% of our energy needs coming from coal. And we need to replace all of those energy needs. And if you think about Modipi and Kusile, more than 4,000 megawatts in one of those plants. Now imagining Eskom decommissioning 30,000 megawatts worth of the power fleet that's aging, and you've got a renewables solar plant that's 150 to 200 megawatts. You realize the scale of power replacement we need to undergo in terms of the mix. So yes, renewables will play a massive role, but gas has to play a role as well, especially with an abundance of supply in the region. And if you think about it, a lot of Sasol's businesses globally, a lot of our GTL technology that has been exported to many other markets in the petrochemical space has utilized gas. So gas is not something that can just be used for power generation, but also for heating and industrials and really to industrialize our country. So there's a lot of opportunity for gas. Barring the fact that we will have to balance the energy mix going forward with renewables as well. So I think there's a place for both of them in the mix going forward as we get rid of coal out of the energy mix in South Africa.
Desmond Desar from the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance. You've heard, well, two people in a way provide a partial defense of gas. Let me just call it a partial defense for the moment. Do we need to use gas as a transitional technology, or do you believe that we should be moving to renewables more quickly? And is it really technically possible to do that, Desmond?
Certainly, I agree that we should be moving to renewables. It's happening all over the world. It's happening in parts of Africa, in northern Africa, where electricity produced from renewables is exported to Europe. It's happening in Germany. We've got more sunshine. We've got more sunshine resources than anywhere else in the world. So why aren't we moving to renewable? Why haven't we got a plan to increase renewable in this country and take people off the grid? This notion that gas is a transition and that we have to move away from coal, but every day you read about it and you talk to community people, there are coal mines opening up all over this country. So why is this being punted as a transition, gas as a transition, and at the same time we're getting more coal mines being opened up? There's something wrong in the country that's not been revealed to the public. There's no honesty in this whole thing, and I think that's the problem. Coal is not the answer. Certainly we know that. But so is gas. We know that the hazards of gas and the methane that will be created out of gas is just as dangerous as all the other gases. And I think herein lies the rub. It's not going to create jobs. The miners that might lose jobs are not being, there's no discussion taking place with any coal miners of how do they move away, upskill them, train them to do other jobs. If this gas is being punted as a just transition, it's not. There's no discussions taking place, and miners will lose their job eventually if we phase out coal without any conversation taking place. And so we're not going to be grappling with the unemployment in this country. There's going to be an increase in unemployment. And what's going to happen is going to be more profit for these companies that come here. And all that profit is going to be shipped overseas once again. So it doesn't create jobs. It doesn't redistribute the wealth. It doesn't create community-owned solar stuff that can be done. This gas is going to be that's been brought in and onto the ships where they're going to be where they're going to be converted into products for the country. It's about money. And so the community and people are going to be left behind. And this is the problem with the whole process. They haven't thought it out carefully. They haven't had a conversation with most of the people in this country. We know that renewable creates jobs. The facts are there. The stats are there. We know that it doesn't harm the environment. We know that you can upskill people very easily. Within a few months, you can train them from coal mining to other things to renewable energy. And we know that renewable plants can be set up. We've heard the discussion right on, but we know the facts are out there. It doesn't take anybody. It can take you within 3 to 6 months to set up renewable plants, depending on the need. So why aren't we doing that there? Because not only do we create jobs for people, we also can create those jobs in communities where people live. We also can train people to maintain those renewable energy plants. But more importantly, is that there's not going to harm the environment and people.
Gentlemen,
methane gas causes a lot of chemicals.
There's around the 8 preferred bidders who've been told that they can now produce emergency electricity, independent power producers, and add that to the grid. They have to do it by August next year. You saw the announcement by the Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe, yesterday. We're joined by Prashaen Reddy, a partner at Kearney Mantashe from the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance, Vito Schnabel from the South African Photovoltaic Industry Association, and Dr. Jaco Volskink, Strategy and Sustainability Analyst at the University of Stellenbosch Business School. Dr. Volskink, if I can come to you, Mantashe has made the point several times that this is in a way the product of secret deals, long-term contracts, 20 years, we don't know the details of it. This is a technical area. It's technical, but electricity arises big emotions. I don't want my children to grow up in a world and to live in a world, to have to bring up my grandchildren in a world in which my generation has stood by and watched it being ruined. At the same time, I get incredibly frustrated every night when I have load shedding, as we've had this week. How important is it that government, the Energy Ministry, in a way, take us along with their thinking on all of this?
Even I think the legitimacy of our government is certainly in question, and I think this is one area where, up to now, I think the South African government has really done well. So I think what we're seeing here is actually quite worrying. I think we should be very concerned. I don't think it has been transparent at all. So I think government needs to be more transparent. I think there needs to be more participation, as Desmond mentioned as well, for the government just to remain legitimate and for us to believe that what they're doing. There's one other aspect that I want to mention. What we saw with Medupi was that if you trust government to build plants, it takes forever because there's an incentive to take forever because you get paid for building. With independent power producers, there's an incentive for them to start pumping because they need to pay back their loans. So I think we're going in the right direction with independent power producers, but we may not be selecting the right ones.
Is this a moment, Dr. Volskink, in which gas could sort of show itself and in which government could renew its legitimacy? If this works and is seen to work, I mean, government's got and Eskom have terrible reputations at the moment when it comes to electricity. And electricity is a symbol. I mean, the national mood, I would argue, is sometimes dictated by load shedding. If this works, I mean, it could restore some of government's legitimacy.
Certainly, I think our economy is bleeding, and we've been investing a lot of money in renewables, and we're still having rolling load shedding. So I think if this solves it, I think, you know, the government is in a tight squeeze. On the one side, they want more renewables. On the other side, you have to have power now. And I think this could be a solution. I think it could be the saving grace of the government. The jury is out on that one.
Prashaen Reddy, I mean, we're going to have now at least three of these big ships. It may be more ships sort of, you know, tied together. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. They're going to be using liquefied natural gas to produce electricity. Desmond Desar has made the point that it may not be safe, that one of these ships sank. How safe is it? I mean, I don't think any people would be in danger because they'll be, you know, not near a built-up area. They'll actually be in a harbor. But are they safe?
Yes, they are safe. I mean, for sure, we've had petrochemical, oil and gas facilities around the world operating for many years. They come with their hazardous nature, and they need to be managed safely. These operations, of course, could result in environmental issues. But at the same time, they have to. Car Power Ship, I guess, has been in operation for a long time. They have many ships around the world, and it's not that we see them causing issues all the time. So I think it needs to be carefully managed. These facilities, as with all petrochemical facilities, have to be safely managed. But in essence, they should be able to be safely operated. They will be, as you say, far away from at least urban areas. But at the same time, they're quite common. And we see many of these facilities being created across the world, not just for power, for gas, for oil, and for many other types of facilities. So even offshore renewable facilities as well. So many of these things have been created as well.
I mean, producing electricity is actually difficult. It's a technical and chemical process, and so it is often dangerous in some ways. I know Gwede Mantashe will be champing at the bit to tell me that solar power is completely safe, and I'll give him a chance to do that. But you're saying that this is safe. We don't need to worry about an exploding ship.
As long as it's managed well, yes. Certainly, we don't see these ships exploding every day, right? So these are facilities that are managed quite well across the world. And if they are managed well, we shouldn't see a problem.
Prashaen Reddy, a partner at Kearney, I do realize that you have to go and that you've stayed longer than we asked you to. Thank you very much indeed. I do appreciate your time this afternoon. Gwede Mantashe, if I may come to you from the Photovoltaic Industry Association, just to continue this conversation. We've been talking about this system, which is emergency power provision. These IPPs will produce power to deal with the emergency we have now. But over time, we're obviously seeing the price of electricity coming from the solar industry getting lower and lower all the time.
Yes, Stephen, that's correct. And I think there is no other generation that can produce energy as inexpensive as solar can do that. And I think just also back to the point that, you know, we had this program started in 2010. Actually, the first plants were built in 2012, 2013, 14. But then we had a gap for 4 years. If we have built in during that gap, we would have had much more energy in the grid by now, which is unfortunate. It's history. It's water down the bridge, so we need to look forward. And I think that is what we need to look into now with new technology coming on board. I remember when the first projects were built, we had like 250-watt modules, panels that produced 250 watt. Now we're seeing panels that can produce 550 and 650 watts. So that shows you the technology has moved really strongly. And the same is also there in terms of the battery technology. Battery technology has moved fast and forward. And I think the combination of that together with wind and others, we always call it the symphony of renewables, can really make this work. And the beauty, I think Jaco said it earlier, is we are blessed with natural resources. Wind and solar is in South Africa abundance. We have got best resources in the world. Actually, we're competing. I think Chile is slightly better. Namibia, southern part of Namibia is maybe slightly better, but our Northern Cape areas and all of South Africa is brilliant for solar resources. So that is something we should just use and harvest. It is there. It's it's just brilliant that we have this. Also, we've done a lot in terms of the of SAPIA, of the association, in terms of developing developer series. That is a seminar series where we reached out. I think we had over 3,000 participants, where we taught and engaged with local developers that want to become developers. So we're very engaged in that. We're also, with the PV Green Card program, very involved in the skills development to get people skilled up into PV installations, from being somebody that puts PV panels down to all the way to being an electrician and these things together. So I think there's a huge opportunity for South Africa in terms of making this move away from the fossil fuels to the renewables, and it will be definitely to the benefit of our kids.
Gwede, I mean, the problem, of course, and you know the problem is the main criticism of your industry is that the sun doesn't shine all the time.
Yeah, that criticism I hear, but it's being used. I mean, that is history, because as I said earlier, it's a symphony of generators. So it is wind at a time, it is sun during the day. The wind is very complementary, by the way, to the sun, and it happens in the evening. And then the next thing is storage, and storage is something, by the way, every generator needs. There is not one generator that has got storage. So if you want to talk about storage, and coal-fired plant storage is the stockpiles that they've got on the yard. And if it rains and they get wet, they also have got a problem, by the way. We had seen that. So storage is an issue for any generator, and we have got very good pump storage schemes in South Africa, by the way, and we can't utilize them because we don't have the energy to pump the water back up when we've got excess. So now we have to load shed in order to replenish these reserves. And that is where we could actually put more energy and more effort into and really make that storage solution coming. And I mean, that can also be deployed very fast. I don't know if you've heard about this 100-day bet that our citizen, or previous SA citizen, Elon Musk had with Australia, where he within 100 days produced that battery and put it down there. So it can be deployed. It is there. The prices for batteries coming down every day. The automotive industry is helping us in that, in a big regard. Remember, the renewable or the energy sector is only taking about 5 to 6% of batteries that are produced. So the majority goes into the automotive space. So if that gets upgraded and those gigafactories of battery storage will start producing, they are currently in construction, you will see a lot of storage solutions coming, and it's going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, so not in 20 years. And that's, you know, where we think we can play a much greater role in a short term already.
Desmond Desar, it seems to me then, to sort of sum up this conversation, over time, it seems inevitable that electricity generation is going to go into the renewable space. I think no one disagrees with that. No one expects to have coal-fired power stations in 100 years. The risk, of course, is that there's sort of long-term, almost permanent damage to the environment during this transition.
Well, there's a willingness of the people of this country to discuss the energy future, and I think that must be respected. And I think we have a lot of brains in this country, brilliant minds. They can put together energy plans, and that should be brought to the fore, rather than government coming with a fait accompli plan and bringing these car power ships into our harbors that pose serious risk. I would say that we have to take the plunge, not only for the future generations that are demanding that we do something about it, but also for our own future, for our own existence as human beings. Because we know for a fact that climate change is a reality now. And we can't go on past promises and continue down the road with coal. And we can't go on this new route that's been proposed that we should frack or we should go and explore for gas in the ocean or get gas from the ground. I think we need to understand that gas is not the solution at all, and it's going to harm somebody along the way. And I wanted to say this earlier on, but let me just say it now, is that having lived in the shadow of the petrochemical and chemical industry, including major gas pipelines, we had huge gas explosions with pipelines. Lucky enough, this happened, and some of these pipelines run through schools. And fortunate enough that when the pipeline blew a few years ago at the Tonga primary school, that the kids were at home. The learners and educators weren't at school. They were all on holiday, December. So that happened hundreds of times. But we know for a fact that all over the world, there's information around some of the gas explosions and fires that have taken place in the UK, in Europe, in Germany, as well as in the US, where these things occur. Do we want to import these hazardous facilities to South Africa, knowing fully well that they pose a risk? We've had so much of, we're sitting with two refineries, one in Cape Town that's completely shut because it blew up, and one in Durban where I live in the shadow of Petronas, the engine refinery that blew up on the 4th of December. So these are hazards that blow up completely. We are just fortunate enough that people haven't been killed, and that is through the grace of God. But these refineries and petrochemical industries and gas plants are quite hazardous, and they've blown up in our local communities for a number of years. We have the evidence about it. And the reason that we are saying let's rather move to renewable is that it will create a lot more jobs. And the trade unionists are beginning to come to the fore now and saying, wow, that could create jobs, because they've seen examples of how many jobs are being created. They've seen the examples that their health has not been affected. It's happening in other parts of the world. It should happen here in South Africa. And we need to provide access to energy to people. The gas transition is never going to provide access to 77% of population that has got no access to the grid. And if you want to put our population to access the grid, then the way to go is going to be a renewable energy.
Well, Desmond, hold on. Desmond, 77% of people don't have access to the grid. The electrification rate's much higher than that.
Yeah, I'm talking about there's 100% of, I'm not talking about the industry, right? The industry on its own uses most of the energy.
Okay, I'm with you.
Big corporations.
All right.
So when you talk about the population, they're not on the grid. Most of them are off the grid because not only because of electricity is so expensive, but they're just not being connected to the grid. How is it that we have two of the big coal-fired power stations, Medupi and Kusile, and the people that live alongside it don't have access to the energy, to the electricity, to the grid?
Right,
that tells you that coal has been a failure.
We're going to leave it there.
So are people in Zululand going to have access to the gas? I doubt very much.
Well, Desmond, hold on. They plug into the grid that already exists, and I mean, our electrification rate is well over 2/3. I don't have it in front of me, but I think over 80% of South Africans have access to electricity at the moment. We're going to leave this conversation there for the moment. Desmond Desar, thank you, from the South Durban Community Environmental Alliance. I really appreciate the time. Prashaen Reddy, a partner at Kearney, thank you. Gwede Mantashe from the SA Photovoltaic Industry Association. Dr. Jaco Volsking, a senior lecturer in strategy and sustainability at the University of Stellenbosch Business School. It's been an important conversation, a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate the time. It's Friday afternoon. Thank you.